How long do you expect to get out of a graphics card? How about out of a processor? Hard drive? How long do Intel, AMD, and nvidia think that you should get out of their parts? For me, the i5-2500K, released in 2012, set a bit of a gold standard for long-lasting computer parts. That processor lasted me through every expansion of StarCraft 2, many Call of Duties, countless indie games, Counter-Strike Go, Overwatch, Forza, and more. It wasn't until 2019 that I was really beginning to feel my computer lost a step or so, and even then, I could have held on a little bit longer, but I decided to upgrade more than anything because I was getting to be a bit paranoid that any given day it might randomly die on me and maybe take something else with it. So I happily moved on to an affordable i5-6600K at that time, which I set and forget to 4.5 gigahertz, and that CPU only lasted me 3 years, and ironically enough, actually took a motherboard with it. For me, even if I have the money to afford the top tier stuff, I often choose the more middle of the road reasonable option and take a certain amount of satisfaction in how long I can squeeze out of things that were meant to be tossed years ago. See, my parents were a little bit older when they had me, and their parents were a little bit older when they had them. All of them being on second or third marriages, and so the cultural line is actually shockingly close to the frugal, hand-me-down, and penny-scraping ways that came from the Great Depression. And worse yet, my parents' parents at least often saw frugality as a virtue in itself, and so here I am, being a little bit extra smug, seeing part after part release and getting just as many FPS with only one setting or two lowered. So, know that when I say that I don't think I've ever made as good a purchase as my GTX 1080, I really do mean it. This card still runs newer games just fine at 1080p. Now I know how that sounds. Even if 1080p is the most common current resolution, that really means we're about 2 years away from 1440p taking over the reins and 1080p beginning its final sharp fall off. People who've had 1440p and 4K rigs for years might just chuckle at the thought of still running 1080p in 2025, and I understand that, but beyond pushing some more pixels, there's never really been a need to upgrade. That is, until now. We're now 4 generations deep on RTX graphics cards and ray tracing capable AMD cards, and while ray tracing sounded like a cool idea just a handful of years ago, we're now living in a world where the GTX 700, 900, and 1000 series cards are done for. That death knell, interesting enough to me, is being led by id Software and Machine Games, 2 companies known for making excellently crafted and highly optimized games. And yet now they tell me that after showing us all what Vulkan can do with the first Doom, how cinematic the experience can be in Wolfenstein, and just how many FPS you can squeeze out of a toaster with Doom Eternal, now they tell me they're moving on from me and those like me. Price of entry for Indiana Jones and Doom, Medieval, Warhammer, whatever, is a whole handful of ray tracing cores. Well, personally, I'm left holding my heart in shock and sadness that they would dump such a good customer after all this time. It was me and my friend group who kept going on and on about how Doom and Wolfenstein was so awesome and encouraged them to buy it, and while I don't regret that, my favorite companies have now strung me up on the tree of woe and left me to die. But there's no doubt that these games are beautiful and even look fun. And it'll be glorious to see just how far these 2 bastions of PC gaming goodness will be able to push ray tracing and its various suite of effects. No doubt they're going to show the rest of the industry just how far you can really push this new tech and what it looks like to build a game from the ground up using ray traced lighting. No doubt there are cost savings involved with using RTX for the entire development pipeline, and by doing so they get to hold space as the developers who ushered in the new proper era of ray tracing exclusive titles. So soon, every Ubisoft game, every Call of Duty title, every new live service and gacha title will be using ground-up ray trace lighting, especially as we leave behind the era of the PS4 and the Xbox One. You know we're past the halfway point of a console lifespan when the rumors begin about the next generation's start, and well, that's pretty much now. Rumors about the PS6 have begun, Nintendo's in-between generation console is launching soon, and sure to be so-so and die a sad death by 2029. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think Xbox really knows what they're doing, let alone anybody else, but the emphasis on dual release between Windows and console is nice for however long they want to keep doing that, hopefully forever. But here's the rub. We all know the RTX 5000 series just launched in January of 2025, and of course the supply is dismal. Worse yet, the performance gains over last generation are dismal too, so after all this time, when it's finally looking like an upgrade is mandatory going into 2026 and particularly beyond, not only are the upgrades impossible to find, but they're not particularly exciting either. Yeah, features like 2, 3, and 4x multi-frame gen are cool to see, and the talk of neural rendering for textures is a neat idea that nvidia has been cooking up for years. And of course, the 5090 is a good graphics card, but with no stock anywhere. And now we have this conspiracy developing that the 5070 is really a 5060, and the 5080 is really a 5070, and the 5090 is really a 5080, and the 5090 is waiting to come out as a TI refresh card in a couple of years. And all this after we thought that the price to performance ratio was going to hold stable. It's all just, well, it's a bit tiresome, a bit exhausting, and I'd much rather be overjoyed to upgrade than feel poked and prodded like aging cattle being rounded up for slaughter after many years of happily bearing milk and calves. See, for me, growing up around the computer culture of the 2000s, the expectation was that after 2 years or so, you'd be lucky to get new games to run on lower settings using a computer that had managed to run everything maxed out. And that trend continued for the better part of a decade. I mean, I watched AGP turn into PCIe, IDE into SATA, CRT to LCD, LED, OLED. Around 2012, something happened. Computer tech stopped flying at the blistering pace we're used to. Slowly, we started getting more life out of our computer parts, and then at some point, we just grew to believe that these changeovers, these tech switches, wouldn't hit us the way that they used to. But, well, here we are. The GTX 1080 is now dead. But here's the thing. It might be dead, but that bitch is still walking. She's still running. She's still got games going over 100 FPS, over 60 FPS. She's still got something to give. And for as long as she's alive, baby, I'm going to keep her running and see what she can really do. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. The GTX 1080 is dead. Long live the GTX 1080.